Hello, welcome back to another Fowler on my channel. I'm Jacob from the Books Corner. Today we are starting a brand new video. This is my long-winded, long-form video about Taylor Jenkins Reid. Taylor Jenkins Reid is a very, very popular book over on Book Talk and BookTube. She started her fame over here on BookTube, where I'm going to talk about one of those first books. This video is going to be broken up into several different sections, plus a little bit of a tiny portion of a reading vlog. We're also going to be ranking all of her books, and I'm going to be telling you how you should read them. Lots of things to discuss. So, first things first, upmost, there will be chapter times linked down below, in case you guys are curious about some of my experiences, my opinions, and things are those lines. It's mostly just going to be me sitting here talking to you about the books, some of my mini reviews I've done in the past about the books, and then reading her newest novel, ranking on the stories, and so forth. I just wanted all my thoughts and opinions on Taylor Jenkins Reid in one video. I've done things like this in the past with Riley Sagar and Karen Slaughter. Those were based on their standalones, and you could see what the year they came out in will determine on why there might be a book that you really like is not talked about in that video, because obviously authors come out with new books every year, and so that could be a very big reason why. This one is all the way up to her newest release, which is Carrie Soto. It's back, which we'll talk about momentarily. First things first, let's talk about my experience, how I came to know who Taylor Jenkins Reid was. Well, technically, my first hearing of Taylor Jenkins Reid would have to be The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I actually have two books planned. Most of the books will be on the screen, but was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which we'll jump into a little bit later on what this actual book is about. I think this is my first time reading from her. This was a very unique experience. I actually did not finish the first time I read this. I had to go back and I reread this like 2 years later and absolutely loved it. The first book that I remember completing from her was Daisy Jones and the Six, which I have yet to decide what order I want to do this in. I think it's more interesting if we talk about where she came from and we start from the books back there than do it in that order. She has a total of 9 books, including an Audible original. All books will be reviewed here in this video. I have clips from past Jacob that I'm going to be shoving in here throughout talking about each one of these stories, which is great because, like, I don't remember everything about them and I didn't reread them all. The only book I'm reading for this video is her newest one. So let's start with her original. I'm pretty sure her first book that she ever wrote, her debut. So her first book that she ever wrote was called Forever Interrupted. Forever Interrupted followed, if I'm not mistaken, so Forever Interrupted, just had to get a quick rundown, is following Ellie and Ben's love story. They meet at like a pizza shop, they fall in love 9 months later, 6 months later, something along those lines. It's a very short amount of time in between the time that they meet. Like 6 months later, they're eloped, they're married. 9 days later, he dies. It's all in the description. His mother does not like her, but because she's technically next heir, they have to make a lot of difficult decisions, and it goes back and forth between their love story and their like continuation. I'm gonna throw in old Jacob, who knows from when, from whenever I read this and I reviewed this, to tell you my thoughts and opinion on my initial reaction to the book, or my initial review of the book, and then we'll come back to a forward Jacob, where I will talk about my remembrance of it, how memorable it was, and compared to some of her other writing. Interrupted, which is my last Taylor Jenkins Reid. So we have Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I gave this a 3.5 stars. This follows average 20 something. Oh, this is right. This is about the girl who her husband ends up dying, and she ends up forming a bond with his mom, his mother, and they end up being married for a very short amount of time. It was okay. There's a lot of things here that I really did enjoy, which we'll talk about more in that wrap-up, and I don't want to very much hold myself to it here, like talk about a lot here. But there's also a lot here that I didn't really enjoy. I don't know. I had such a mixed bag with Taylor Jenkins Reid backlog that, like, Forever Interrupted is interesting. It's her debut novel, and it's a very strong debut, so she did have that going for her. When I reviewed this back in 2020, it looks like, in July, I gave it a 3.5 stars. Normally, especially with some of her early writing with Carrie and Reid, a lot of her plots are very complex and there's a lot of layers, and I might even mention that in the review, that I wasn't really sure where I would land on a lot of them. I remember this being one of those trickier ones where there was plot points later on in the story that I wasn't entirely comfortable with or sure how I felt with at the time, and still a little lopsided on that. But because of how well it was handled and how well she does certain things towards the front of the book, I landed on a 3.5. This is her first novel, and I think her writing here is still extremely strong. It's changed so much since this point, which is what we're going to get into as we continue down the line. Since her debut in 2013, one would even say she has been called out for ghostwriting and stuff because of how much of a change there is of her, just of her writing alone. I really like this writing. I really like the romance side of Taylor Jenkins Reid, even if that's not what she's known for anymore. I still like it. The next book that came out was After I Do. After I Do, this one is a bit more on the complicated side. We follow Ryan and Lauren as they have reached a breaking point in their marriage and they decide to take a 1-year gap. That's a long time away from your spouse if you did not know, but that's how long they decided to do it. And I remember feeling very complex on the situation. So let's see what Past Jacob thinks. And then After I Do, I gave 3.5 stars. This one, so After I Do, which I'm not going to hold up, I'm just going to sit here, is about a relationship that is on its last leg. They're 13 years in, and they decide to call it quits. They're going to take a 1-year sabbatical and see if they end up getting back together. I thought the things that they deal with, the things that they talk about and things are beautiful. It was amazing to the point of where I was not very satisfied. I don't really count this book as satisfying, but I think everybody should read it just because it was just so mesmerizing to read. I love one of the aspects of Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I'm going to see if she started with it or if it's something she developed herself, is I don't really tend to care about this part. Hold on, I'm trying to find the halfway mark. This part of the book, I care about this part of the book. I like the build-up. I like seeing every little detail that went in from the time our main character was 2 to the time they were 26, and the story starts. That, I think, is amazing. I think she does it the best I've ever seen. It's normally the part that she's, like, really trying to dive into. I don't believe there's enough time. It takes up half the novel. I think it should be a little longer, and so forth and so forth. And I think One True Loves did it really well. I really, really did enjoy it. It's not as great as, like, Seven Husbands of Hugo or Daisy Jones and the Six, but it's still great. I remember this being another one of those situations. I really like the writing. We go backwards in time before they're married, if I remember correctly, and we see their relationship build to the point where they break up. And then Lauren was such a very difficult character for me. I remember that being very clear because where she fell on the totem pole and some of the conversations and some of the arguments she had with Ryan. I don't really remember being always her side of the arguments, I should say. I also don't remember if I really enjoyed the ending. I think one of my biggest things that I remembered about the ending was that I very strongly agreed that it was a realistic ending. And I think that's like the biggest thing I can give props to Taylor Jenkins Reid, especially in her beginning times as a writer, her beginning stories as they have turned more, I guess, realistic. I guess they're still very realistic, but the fake historical has taken some of the realism out for me personally, which we'll get into. But with the realistic side, I always believe that these are the endings these characters would choose. Not an ending that I think you would choose one to satisfy your reader, but what would that character do in that choice? One could understand. Another one that I could see that someone could make the same statement about is like Last of Us Part 2, which is a video game. In that choice, we have our main character of Ellie having to make a very difficult decision in the end, and she chooses one that's very polarizing. A lot of people don't like the choice. And I remember thinking that Taylor Jenkins Reid did a lot of this. When I initially rated it, which you guys have to know, it's another 3.5 for me. I think I read these in the same day, or very close together. Some people don't think it's a romance book. I remember how I felt on that. Hopefully old Jacob does. And, I think it's interesting in the questions that I brought up here and the answers that are given, I also think is extremely intriguing. Okay, after I do, we have, let me see, Maybe Another Life, which I very much remember very strongly. Maybe Another Life might actually be the first book I ever did finish from her. Maybe Another Life I read back in 2018, which was quite a while ago, even though I still strongly remember it, so good for her. I'm going to jump back to one of those earlier clips of it, or maybe one or two clips from me reading it from that experience, and let you guys see how it was. Is Maybe Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This follows Hannah, who basically has no purpose in life. She is coming from New York and moving to LA to go back home with her friend Gabby. And one night when they get there, Gabby throws her a party at this bar, and she is offered the choice to go home with either Gabby, which takes her down a tremendous, not so good road, and then or go home with Ethan. And Ethan is her ex-boyfriend from high school, which they date off and on from high school, but it's mostly just like a high school romance. And particularly it follows both of those stories. They never interconnect. I want to say that now. It's not a spoiler. I just wish I would have known. If there's a particular story that you are enjoying, I would highly recommend you go and you check out that particular story and you just continue on the line. There is something cool at the end that kind of ties them together, but it's up to you how you feel. I liked Hannah in one story better than I liked Hannah in the other. This is a 3 out of 5 stars just for that simple reasoning that I just didn't enjoy one of the stories. It is not that long of a book, but it's 2 books in one practically. So just keep your know that going in. So yeah, that's the few things I remember taking out from this novel. Once again, this could be a slight spoiler, so I'll turn the color. I don't even know if I talk about it then, and if I did, then I'll just cut this section out. Was the fact there is no correlation between these two storylines. We follow the same main character for the first 30 to 40 pages, and then we get to The Verge, and then The Verge happens, and then it continues on from there. There is a little discrepancy in the world of super, it has a little bit of magical realism, but I think it could have been done better with a little more extra time and care into why we're having parallel stories. What was the point of it? Especially because I very much remember thinking that the story that was not a romance was boring. I remember reading it and being like, I don't need to read all of it. It's not important. And it turned out not to be important. Ironically, I'm still giving them only a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So you can obviously tell why there was a change, why her editor or her publisher or even herself decided I need to find something different to write. We're not there yet. We still have another one or two to go before we get the switch. But you can start to see why. And this was her first, I think, moment in time where she was making that change. Because this has a little bit of magical realism. This also has an interesting story structure, which the other ones all had. But this doesn't have the background and the history of the character in the beginning. If you read her previous novels, she was becoming, I would say, somewhat known for. I would hope, because it's done so well. The next one that we're going to talk about is One True Loves, which this is a very similar premise to one of her earlier books, but instead of him dying, he gets lost in the war. So our 2 characters here are Emma and Jess. Emma, they meet as high school sweethearts. They fall madly in love. He ends up joining the army, I want to say what it is. His plane goes down, or maybe, is that what it is, or is it plane? They travel the world together, living their life fullest and seizing every opportunity for adventure. On their first wedding anniversary, Jess is on a helicopter over the Pacific when it goes missing, just like that, Jess is gone forever. Emma's basically stops her life for this man, and then she meets an old friend named Sam, who is mentioned in the beginning of the book. They find some type of romance, and she is starting to move on years later. And then Jess is found and brought back. This reminded me of Brothers a lot. The Natalie Portman, Tobey Maguire, and the other guy, Jake Gyllenhaal movie, where it's a very similar premise. I think that one might have to do with the military. This one does not. And it's all about who she will choose. And let's see what older Jacob had his thoughts and opinions on this. Love, I gave 4 out of 5 stars to because the message and the complexity of that, which we'll get into, pretty shocking, about a woman whose husband goes missing. He dies, and then he shows back up after she's engaged to somebody else, and it's about that, It's very interesting because the back tells you it's going to explore all these things, and I don't think they explore them very well at all. For instance, I think the grieving process that she does go through is very realistic, but about, like I said, this woman who she gets married, and their first honeymoon, her husband goes off onto this plane. His plane ends up crashing, and then she goes through this period of time of where she falls in love with another person, and then her husband shows back up, and it gets a little awkward. Yeah. So I really liked it. I thought it was enjoyable. I just didn't think everything explored here. I didn't think it was as well done as some of her other novels. As it didn't make me mad. I wasn't mad about certain things. I think a lot of people did kind of upset about in the Goodreads reviews that I did read. Once again, I remember walking out of this one thinking, I think it was a smart decision, even if I don't remember agreeing with it. I could agree with it, I don't remember. As I did have a side. I do remember picking a side between these two characters and being like, this is the person that you love. And I also remember thinking that it was the realistic answer. This is the first one I gave a 4, which is great news for Taylor in her back. So as we continue to progress through her novels, my ratings are getting higher, which is why she's becoming an all-time favorite author. And then we have the switch. So this is the last book that she has in her typical romance genre, with her very much of a story structure point. My best guess is that the last one did not perform as well, and so she decided to write one more under the lines of her beginning novels that obviously put her on some sort of map. Not the big map, but a map itself. I don't know if this was a New York Times bestseller. It does not say so on it, but it could be. It might be a New York Times bestseller. But for One True Love, this is very much more true in the lines of, like, you would think this is book number 3, and after her debut and things, and not book number 4 before the switch. This one also came out in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm pretty sure the first one to come out was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which was 2017, and this blew up. This blew up specifically on BookTube. Book Talk wasn't a thing, obviously. This one blew up on BookTube. Everybody and their mother was reading this. Part of the reason why I picked it up, what I did, was because everybody and their mother was reading it. I remember it was like in 2017, though. I have a mixed journey with Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This follows Evelyn Hugo, as she is telling her story to a reporter about her lives of her 7 husbands. To publish a memoir, she is dying, she's selling all of her estate off, and she picked this girl who had never written anything except a few articles to do it, and there's a whole reason behind it and things like that, and it just follows her time throughout these 7 husbands. This is also the first book inside Taylor Jenkins' universe, so technically you should probably start with 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and go on from there, but because of the time periods and things for the novel, and the time periods of the things for the rest of her books, I'm not really sure where it falls. The only similarity that I will tell you, slight spoilers, maybe the screen will go black and white before you jump into old Jacob, tell you his thoughts and opinions on it. Younger Jacob, I guess. In the past Jacob, is that Mick Rivera is in this. Mick Rivera is a very prominent character in all of Taylor Jenkins Reid's stories, even if he doesn't pop up on a constant. Which is interesting. He's never got his own story. We've heard part of his story throughout a lot of people. But he is one of the husbands. That's all I'll say. Alright, the next thing we'll get into is Past Jacob, telling you guys his thoughts and opinions on Evelyn Hugo. If I have different periods of time, I'll timestamp them on what years they were. Alright, there you go. 7 Husbands, the last one, I mean. It's the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I just finished like 2 nights ago. And it's beautiful. It's my second reread. I read it back in 2018, and this is a 5 out of 5 star read because I just enjoy these books so much. These 2 books. I also enjoy 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It's just amazing. I mean, read it. If you've never read it before, you should totally read it. It makes you cry. The buy rep is amazing, and it's super good. Highly, highly, highly recommend. And thank you to Kate Kavanaugh for getting me to reread it, because your vlog was the reason why I picked it up again, and I was so impressed and so happy with it. So yeah. So when I read this in April of 2020, like I said, on this bandwagon kick, if I'm not mistaken, this is the book that drove me to read her entire backlog. I fell in love with it. I was very enamored with it when I initially read it as well. I'm a sucker for old Hollywood, which I'm sure I mentioned. It was right up my alley, But there was something that I did not vibe immediately with, and then it clicked. When I restarted it from the beginning and I reread it. Honestly, I've been tempted to reread it since. It's been like 3 years, so I feel like it's about time I jump back into the story of Evelyn Hugo. Maybe when we actually get some casting announcements for the movie that's coming out for it. But either way, the biggest change, if we're looking at Taylor Jenkins Reid's like writing style and history, one, this was a huge seller. This was a New York Times bestseller. This was a gigantic release for her. This was the first book I'd say in her career of where the next one mattered. The next one was important. This was also the first book in her career that did not feel like her writing at all. If you look at the writing between, especially the last book and this book, it's two different people, it seems like. It's the same author. I strongly believe it. I'm not in the posing that she got a ghostwriter to write it, because there's a lot of similarities in the writing, a lot of language and things like that that I do think is very similar. I could just see where people are starting to make the comparisons that this person and that person were two different souls because of how different it is. It's still romance in its core. We're following a woman as she's going through 7 husbands of Evelyn, her 7 husbands of this conversation. The next one is still core romance. This one still has romance at its core as well. I'm sure Carrie Soto will as well. But they're not about romances. They're in which is interesting. She also decided to play around with history. There's historical moments in here that are not accurate, and that will continue to be a common theme over the course of her book. These are historical fiction novels, and it's like, that's truly what it is, but it's not like historical fiction on a level of like, oh my god, this is historical fiction. That makes sense? I don't know if this makes sense. This is the first 5-star from her newest releases that I gave, and it's well deserved. The hype is real. I highly recommend Someone Else on Hugo. I'm curious to see where we'll fall on the tier ranking at the end of this video. But that's the 7 Homes I want Hugo. Let's move on to Daisy Jones and the Six. Daisy Jones and the Six was the book that popped off. So editing Jacob coming in here to tell you guys we're just going to jump towards back in the past. I never mentioned it. I just got on this big rant about how much I love this book, and it's amazing, but it will come in a little bit later. I want you guys to know my thoughts before I tell you my thoughts. So let's go ahead and see what Jacob from 2020, I want to say, is when I read this, what my thoughts were then. You guessed it, Daisy Jones in this, and oh guys, this was beautiful. Basically, if they want to read it or if they want to listen to it, whichever they prefer, everybody should just listen to it. This is about a girl named Daisy who ended up joining a band called The Six. This is about the Six coming together in their fall. It's a fictional band in the 70s and 80s, and it's all about what happened behind the scenes. It's like they're coming back for a very, very long interview. It's a full cast audiobook. I highly recommend the audiobook. It was beautiful. I just recommend this video. Okay, I just recommend it. I can't recommend it enough. This is beautiful. I recommend the book. Okay. Evelyn Hugo was big. It was not gigantic. Well, it was pretty gigantic. I remember seeing it everywhere. Daisy Jones and the Six was picked up by Reese's Book Club. I don't know if this was part of Reese's Book Club, but I definitely know Daisy Jones and the Six. And so you had BookTube blowing up about this, telling all their friends, but BookTube was not a big thing. It was somewhat of a big thing, but it wasn't a huge thing, not as big as I would say Book Talk probably is. So, it wasn't the biggest deal. But now you have Reese's Book Club, which is huge, talking about it, and now everybody's talking about Taylor Jenkins Reid. Everybody's talking about Daisy Jones and the Six. Daisy Jones and the Six was a moment. Then you have the amazing, one of the best audiobook experiences I've ever had in my life. Well, at that point, I'd say I've had 1 or 2 better ones, but it doesn't normally get better than Daisy Jones and the Six. It is a story that's written completely in dialogue. There are no action moments. It's like a script. It's very much like a script. It reads somewhat like a podcast. There's 1 or 2 moments that don't, but 96% do. It's connected to her last novel in a way, if you look for the similarities. She's building a world, an empire for herself, one would say, and she's doing a fucking great job at it. Daisy Jones and the Six was a moment. If you weren't a part of that moment, you felt left out in the book culture. That's how big of a deal Daisy Jones and the Six was. To the point that a lot of people who missed the hype felt like it was way overhyped and didn't really understand what the point of it was. I know people to this day who have never read it because they're like, I just won't get it. I wasn't there. And you know what? I get that. You will get it. I highly recommend. The audiobook is phenomenal. The TV show, I'm sure, will be great. This has a band. This is about a band. I didn't really tell you what I just assumed you knew what this was. This is about a band. It's two bands that cross over. We have the Six, and I'm probably thinking of the album. I'm not actually thinking of the band, am I? Either way, it follows Daisy as she's infiltrating this band, not like in a heist way, but like just like she's the new person, she's the new head singer, and she's like an up and coming girl. She's young, and it's about the drama that ensued over the course time that she was a part of it, which is I think only one album, and then they had a famous breakup. They hit huge charts, they became the number one band in 1970s, a rock group. They were nowhere. And so we're figuring out why, is essentially the answer. Same premise, same idea. Episode happens here. We follow an iconic person, and then they disappear, and so we're getting the reasons why this story. And I loved it. I loved it. I loved every bit of it. I loved Daisy. I loved Mick. I loved every single level of this. Mick Rivera, once again, is back a part of it. He plays a small role here, if I remember correctly. This is mostly about Billy and Daisy, the relationships and things, but it's so well done, and the audiobook works so well because it just is like a very long script, which is phenomenal. It takes place in multiple different years. There are songs at the end. I don't know if anybody's ever done covers of that, so that'd be really cool. It's great. And that brings us to our next release, Malibu Rising. Malibu Rising I actually had a vlog for, and then that vlog never made it to the surface on the YouTube ways, and so we'll just do a wrap up here. Let me quickly explain what Malibu Rising is. This follows the three kids of the Mick Rivera. Interestingly enough, right? There's that name again. And in their party that set the Hollywood ablaze in, what year is that? But of course, 24 Hours Survives will change 1983. So just a little bit after the time period of Daisy Jones and the Six. Alright, let me bring you back to past Jacob for what I thought of Malibu Rising. Malibu Rising, which I eventually ended up actually giving a 3.5 out of 5 stars after talking to a friend about it. I think initially I gave it a 4 because I was under the trance of the sibling, but I eventually did give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This is Taylor Jenkins Reid's newest release, and I'd say it is quite disappointing if you're familiar with Taylor Jenkins Reid. This does follow one of the husbands from Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Hugo is not even mentioned, which I think was a missed opportunity, especially because it's a world that she's built, and so I would really like her to expand on it because this takes place in a similar time period. This takes place in the 70s as the Mick Rivera's kids, is it Rivera? Yeah, Riva. As the Riva party goes on, and she throws this like huge party every year, and she invites all of her siblings, and if you get an invite, it's pretty cool. And then it also follows their parents as they're growing up. And I would say the love stories in this are pretty basic, so I was not blown away. This I recommend only for one specific reason, and that is the family drama, and also the siblings, because the sibling love here is phenomenal. It's some of the best I've seen in a long time, so that's why I would recommend Malibu Rising if you're curious. This is nowhere near the standards of Daisy Jones and the Six and or Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is more under the lines of some of her earlier work, but I'd actually say her earlier work maybe is a little bit better because there was a lot more conversation happening there. I had a lot more thoughts and opinions, and it made it harder to rate, whereas this one's pretty basic, which is it sucks. So Malibu Rising is broken up into two timelines, which is probably the part that I did not like the most. I think the ending is great, which is why I eventually ended on a 4, as you guys do know. But everything, there's like some sibling stuff that I really liked that I felt very in tune with. But other than that, I didn't really care for the story itself, which is why it's taken me a very long time to pick up her newest release, which we'll talk about next. Malibu Rising, like I said, takes place with two timelines. We have the Mick Rivera timeline, and here their mom and their relationship and how that works out plays a big part into the end, and then the actual evening of the party with the siblings. I much enjoyed the evening with the siblings. I didn't really care for the romance here, even if there was one, and it did have the classic Taylor Jenkins Reid's storytelling of jumping between times so seamlessly. Like, flashing forward with years and years on these characters without missing a beat and the characters feeling different. Only Taylor Jenkins Reid can do this. It's beautiful. It's done so well. I'm sure someone's gonna be like, this author can, and please tell me, and so I would love to read it. We have Nina, we have Jay, and we have Hud, and we have Kit, which are the ones. Nina is a talented surfer and supermodel. Jay and Hud are champion surfers as well. One is a champion surfer, the other a renowned photographer, and then their baby sister, Kit, once again, are of the legendary singers of Nick Rivera, and it's about this fire that starts and why. And that is Malibu Rising. Now we have Carrie Soto. Carrie Soto I've not read yet, so I have zero thoughts on pain. You'll find those out coming very soon. We're jumping into the vlog portion where I will be reading it with you guys. I don't know what this is about except about tennis. I think the cover is gorgeous. And then we'll read it. I'll tell you my thoughts and opinions. And then we'll do a ranking of how I think if you guys should read, what books you guys should read. S tier, whole 9 yards. And then we'll end the video. That's the plan. Alright, I'll see you once I start. Carrie Soto. Hello, welcome to the vlog portion of this video, section 2 of 3. If you guys just want to know how I feel about Carrie Soto is back, then you go ahead and jump to the next section, the ranking. If there are any spoilers, if I have any touching moments where I'm like, oh, I want to talk about this or whatever, the screen will turn this color. I just want to put that out there for anybody who hasn't read the book. You should be able to watch this section completely without there being any spoilers. And once again, if there's any spoilers throughout the rest of the video, it's the same case, because I could rank something higher because of a certain reason. That could be a spoiler. I think those ones I'll probably just specifically say, hey, this is a spoiler, jump to the next ranking, or whatever. I don't know what Carrie Soto is about. I know it's set in the 80s? I want to say maybe the 60s? There's a time period for it, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure Nick Rivera is in there. And it follows tennis. It's a full audio cast. Normally I get Red Joy Wayland with these books, but not this time around. Yeah, I will update you guys probably towards the beginning, if not the beginning, halfway through, and we'll close it out. This is going to be a very quick vlog of me reading the book, the new Taylor Jenkins read. Once again, if you're seeing this in 2 years, obviously this is not the new Taylor Jenkins read, and you can scour through some of the other videos and stuff. I tend to highlight the books if I've done videos on authors in the past, so they'll be in the thumbnails or stuff like that for anybody who's curious. Like, you're looking for the way it's Riley Sagar and you're trying to figure out where I talked about that, I tend to highlight it so we can talk about in full, or I'll leave a video up of a series that I did with that book in it, so you can find my thoughts and opinions on that book. Or they're also normally talked about. These are authors that I'm reviewing and stuff that I tend to read the newest release, and they tend to pop up on some sort of list at the end of the year as well. So those are all things for you to know. I guess to try to keep me accountable, I'm gonna give you guys a first update. I'm probably 7 or 8% into Carrie Soto is back. This begins with her looking at a competitor who could be a competitor and deciding that she's going to come back into tennis. And then we jump backwards in time. It's when she's like 7 or 8. And then we're following her life. She's very much with her father most of the time. Her dad, I would say, is a borderline abusive, but I can't figure out how I feel about it, because how it's written. So it's a very complex way it's written. And so that's where I'm at. It's probably the most in detail I'm going to give you guys. I'll update you guys when I'm halfway through it, just in case I finish it tonight and it doesn't seem like I need to update you guys halfway through. I'm about to go lay down to listen to it. I'm like 15% in. We are officially caught up to present day, where she's retraining with her dad. That's a spoiler. That's a spoiler. And that's where I'm at. We're back in present day. Still very early in the book, and not a lot of books have been used. So I'm like halfway through Carrie Soto. It's very good. I've seen a lot of reviews saying that she is an extremely unlikable protagonist, and I see it. I understand why people are saying it, but I can't say I necessarily agree. I like her better than some of Taylor Jenkins Reid's newer protagonists, such as, like, I didn't really enjoy everybody in Malibu Rising like a lot of people did. I didn't really see that, but maybe this is what they saw when they read that as well. Taylor Jenkins Reid just has a very particular way she likes to write her protagonist. I think that's one of the clear things that indicates that this is her writing, is her protagonist, because I think anybody can put, like, I think Daisy's similar to this, and I also think in certain ways early Evelyn is early, like really, really early Evelyn is somewhat like this, the naive version of Evelyn, which makes them both somewhat unlikable. But I want to really stick with here is the fact that now we're at a point in the book where I think this is the furthest, without spoilers, I'm not going to tell you where I'm at or anything like that, the furthest inside the book, we're in the timeline of the Terror Dragon 3 universe. So, obviously, Carrie Soto did end up dating Mick Rivera. That's not a spoiler if you've read other of her books. This is something Carrie Soto, I think, has popped up in 2 other books, mostly with her relation to Mick. Not so much of, like, she was a very big part of Malibu Rising, but she had a smaller part, I'm pretty sure, in Daisy, where she now has the memoir, Daisy Jones and the Six. So that was a little weird, not gonna lie to you. I got really meta there for a minute. I'm going back to reading. I really like it. Is it a 5? Probably not. It's like a 4.5, but it's still very good. Still higher than most in some. I figured I'd go ahead and update you guys for my final update for Carrie Soto. Say 5. It was a beautiful 5. I went back and forth for a little bit. It was like a 4.75 or a 5, and it was a 5. I loved everything about this book. I loved the characters, I loved the interactions, I liked how characters were handled, I liked through lines of plots, I liked every aspect. I think every aspect worked on a newer and higher level, and yeah, I don't know. This was beautiful. This was great. One of my favorites. Is it my favorite? Well, you'll find out very, very soon. The vlog video, Terror Dragon's Read video, right? We're going to be ranking. Beginning of the video, I had mentioned what order you should read the books in. The backlog orders the romance before she jumped into historical fiction. All can be read in whatever order you like reading in. I think it's kind of fun to read these in publication order all the way through, just so you can see the buildings of her writing and her style, and things get more and more clear as her books get better. And you think with every book, almost, the books do get better. But, with that being said, with Terror Dragon's Read universe, it would go sometimes Evelyn Hugo, then Daisy Jones and the Six, Malibu Rising, and then Carrie Soto's back, just because of all the references and stuff inside those. You don't want to be spoiled for little moments that could be really iconic. Yeah, if you're trying to read this entire thing. So, now let's rank this shit, right? 8, because I never did talk about Evidence of the Affair, which is a short novella that's like an hour or something long that was done for Audible. I don't mention it at all. I'm not going to rank it here. It doesn't really have a place, to be honest with you. I don't think I really liked it, but I did read it. I read it specifically for a different version of this video that I filmed like 2 years ago, and now we're here completing that legacy, which is kind of fun. At the bottom, number 8, we have Maybe in Our Life. I've gone back and forth a lot on this ranking, and I think logically for me personally, Maybe in Our Life would be the bottom toe of. Maybe in Our Life deals with some very interesting subject matters. One storyline is so bad in my opinion that it's almost unreadable, and you only want to care for one version of that character, of Hannah, and so like Maybe in Our Life just like fails at everything it's trying to like excel. Plus, slight spoiler, there's actually like no big thing that happens, or there's no like moment of where the storylines finally collide and you get to see something. I've never really learned from this, but I wanted something about it, and nothing came out of it. I don't know if that makes any sense. There's no connection. These 2 stories eventually verge to make, this book of talking about 2 different books. And then it's just 2 books until the end, which annoyed me. So that would be Maybe in Our Life. The next one I'm going to have to put, I think I'm going to put Forever Interrupted here. Forever Interrupted was her debut novel. I'm not going to really talk about her about. I've mentioned several times in the video what these books are about. It's just not as strong as some other titles because it's her debut. It's a good debut. It's a strong debut, but I had some very conflicting thoughts by the end of how I felt, how the story fully played out. Then we'll go After I Do. After I Do is the one, complicated edit, but it's the one about people with the marriage problems. It has an extremely realistic ending, but it does help hurt the ranking, even though I think I would not change the ending to better like off the book, you know what I mean? So that's where I put After I Do. I think After I Do falls in a good 6th place. The 5th place book is her last non-traditional, or her last before she does her remix historical fantasy, and that is One True Loves. One True Loves is about people get married really fast, or they're together and then they get married, and Duke goes missing and she ends up in a relationship with somebody else. And I felt like the complexities here were dealt with so well, and trauma and things were done with so well, even though honestly I didn't really love the book. I have to put it here. There has to be respect put on One True Loves, in my opinion, from things I remember and the things I talk about in those clips and stuff. of old Jacob talking, you know what I mean? Now we get to the really difficult parts. I think number 4 is Malibu Rising. In this, I actually said it was a bad book. I don't think it's a bad book. I kept it in there just so I can talk about it here. I don't think it's a bad book on reflection. I know why I said that initially. I like the siblings dynamic. I felt really related to that, but there's a lot of this book I didn't really care for, like, at all. Make Rivera's, like, early plotline storyline, hated. I hated it. Did not care for it. I just wanted it to be over. And there's only like 1 or 2 siblings I actually really liked. I liked the ending, though. I thought, yeah, that's Malibu Rising. Alright, now we get to the really difficult shit. All these last 3 books are 5 stars. These 3 books I'd recommend over anything else Sarah Jenkins reads has ever written. And I will continue to recommend these books for the rest of the time. They are some of my favorite books I have read. Carrie Soto is Back is one of my favorite books of the year. This is crazy to me. I think they all deserve the number 1 spot for some reason or the other. Daisy Jones and the Six is one of the most perfect, like, if you're sitting down to listen to a podcast and you want this amazing story about this amazing rock band, it should be number 1 for that reason, right? And Sometimes I'm with Hugo is the pinnacle of my favorite time period of all time, Old Hollywood. I love Old Hollywood with such a passion. Not as much as anymore. I'd say Old Hollywood and Gladiator times are some of my favorite things in the world. Honestly, I should probably write a book about Old Hollywood mixed with Gladiators, mixed with like a revenge storyline. Okay, Jacob, stop planning right now. But inside makes Seven Hours Evelyn Hugo number 1. Carrie Soto as a character needs to be my brand. I fucking love Carrie Soto. I love the journey that we go on with the character of Carrie. And I love tennis, and I love being in that world. I love every little, like, aspect of it. It's beautiful to me. It's amazing to me, and I just fucking adore it. On a side note, makes it, like, a number 1 because of the character. I mean, logically, I think I like Evelyn the best. So, I think that needs to be a factor. I think I really need to reread these 3 books and really make a deciding ranking for what number 1 is, but we're just going to go off the top of my head. I think number 3... we're going to play Daisy Jones and the Six. Ooh, is that rough? Yeah, it's rough. Daisy Jones and the Six is number 3. I love it for what it is. I wouldn't love it if I actually read the book. I never recommend the physical book to anybody. It's a very quick, fast read if you do read the physical because of how it's written, but I just don't think it works in my opinion. I think it works so well as a full audiobook cast. Number 2, we're going to give Carrie Soto is Back. Her newest release, and somehow she's topping herself again. And it could be that I really just didn't vibe with Malibu Rising, and so Carrie Soto's Back is just like a fresh, my taste. Also, this cover, guys, this cover is gorgeous. I like this cover in every color I've seen it in. It's beautiful. I want it so bad. This character is phenomenal. The environments that we're under is phenomenal. The way tennis is written is phenomenal. World building in it is phenomenal. I fucking love this book. Some people really don't like this book. And I get it. I understand why. And some people really don't like the character of Carrie Soto. And I fucking love Carrie Soto. So, like, I don't know you, but, like, I get you. It's fine. And then, lastly, we have to put the queen herself, Seven Heavens, Evelyn Hugo, on top. And Evelyn Hugo's defense, out of all these other books on this list, I think it's the only one that made me actually cry. Like, really cry. Like, big tears. And that right there should be awarded. I don't know why I'm crying right now. Don't ask me. But that should be awarded in itself. So I'm going to say, number 1... obviously, this is the date stamp of in 2022 when this video hopefully is coming out. Carrie Soto is her newest release. It's number 1. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this video. Do you guys like videos like this? Do you guys like it where I go back, I read their entire backlog? I've done a few videos like this. This is a very different style. I don't normally have, like, old footage to grab from, so, like, that was kind of fun. I've never done that before. But let me know how you guys like the style, if you guys like this type of video. I have a few other ones where I'm trying an author where I read one book of theirs, and I'll just judge them based on that one book. I did it with a book that I'm sure a lot of people are going to really hate me about. But I have a few of those planned as well in the future. So let me know what your guys' thing is, what your guys' taste is. Do you guys like it where I'm sitting down and I'm reviewing a bunch of books for you at once? Or do you guys like the core, like, one vlog type of thing? Just let me know in the comments how you guys do. If you guys enjoyed, please go give me a thumbs up. And don't forget, comment down below. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you all next time for another beautiful video. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.